Good afternoon, Robert.
Good morning.
Good. Hey, Miss Annie, there she is.
Hey, good morning to both of you.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm finishing lunch.
yes,
oh,
yes.
that's right.
Yeah,
I just had my morning walk.
yeah, I've been on since 6 o'clock this morning. There's a wonderful summit in Toronto, looking at the Toronto bioregion and how to enliven it, run by Joe Brewer. And it's been just wonderful. It's 4 days. So it's going on today. Well, it's ending today, I think. There may be a catch up tomorrow. I can't remember. They're going to do a final tomorrow morning. But it's been just very interesting in all sorts of ways. So I've been getting up at 6 in the morning to
Wow.
be online.
And that's 9 o'clock here, no problem.
Yeah, right. It's 9 o'clock there too. Yes.
I have
And then a day or so ago, Fritjof did a conversation, which was very rich. So he's got some new ways of talking about what he's doing. He's really been stimulated, I think, by some of his students to think in a slightly different way about what he's doing. And in fact, he said he had insights just like yesterday that he shared with us a little bit, which he's not really committed to because he hasn't thought deeply enough about them to feel comfortable in their expression. So that has been very interesting also.
So is it a systems point of view? Is that is that what he's
Both of them are, yeah.
Yeah, a systems point of view. He's
Yeah,
good.
they are.
Yeah. Any insights that you can share that he's bringing forward?
I can share briefly. Let me see the notes that I took. So the distillation would be that there are 4 aspects: biological, cognitive, social, and ecological, that he's dealing with. What is missing for me is spiritual. He's tying everything to different theories: the theory of autopoiesis, dissipative structures, the Santiago theory, and Gaia. And there are 4 principles of organization. This is his main thing. One is life is organized in networks, which I still am having problems with. And a subset of that is that life organizes itself. And then number 2 is life is continually regenerative. 3, life is inherently creative. And 4, life is inherently intelligent.
Right.
Yeah. So that's like the core now of what he's talking about. And then he has an 8-fold way of life that he's come up with out of this to sort of deepen it a bit. And I can put all this in the chat.
Good. Thank you.
So the first is a defining characteristic of life is the defining characteristic of life is a certain pattern of organization, specifically in his view and network. Number 2, these living networks are not networks of structures, but networks of processes, which is, I think, important. 3, the processes are processes of regeneration, of continual transformation, and the replacement of components. 4, in order for this continual regeneration to be possible, the network needs to have access to continual metabolic flows. 5, as the metabolic flows go through the network, feedback loops come into play, and with them, self-organization. 6, positive feedback may lead to processes of emergence, representing life's inherent creativity. 7, in order to assure access to the appropriate metabolic flows, the network needs to interact cognitively with its environment. And 8, this means that all life is inherently intelligent.
Sounds good
And one
to
of the
me.
other things he said, which I think is really key, well, there were two points, other points that he made, which are going to be in this because that's the way I recorded it. He mentioned AI briefly, and I'll talk about this in more in a minute, that AI is not able to learn through embodied wisdom, and what a fatal flaw that is. And the other kind of interesting side point he made is that life is often talked about in negatives, i.e., it's non-equilibrium, non-linear, that kind of stuff. So what is that saying about how we're viewing life? So those are just kind of interesting things.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I have to do this in pieces. It's not going to let me do everything all at once. So let's see. All right.
So you're putting it in the chat? Did you
Yeah, but
say-
I have to do it in pieces. So there's one.
Right.
Here's the 4 principles of organization. I hope it'll let me do them all. Oh, good.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then an enlightened 8-fold way. Let's see if we can do all these. Yeah, I asked Fritjof about his understanding of the difference between network and ecologies, and to my mind, he did not answer that question. He babbled on, but it made no sense to me. So, and it was a big, there were 20 or 30 of us, so I didn't belabor the point, but I'm still, I mean, there's definitely a relationship. And for the only, I don't know, where I'm going right now with it is that it's, the ecologies are deepening and more of a meshed relationship. We did talk about the difference between networks and webs. An indigenous woman was there, wanted to bring up webs as her way of bridging that. And that sort of works. Indra's net sort of works, but it still doesn't talk about the incredible meshing that happens with ecologies. And he said, well, it's, networks of networks. Well, yeah, it is sort of, but it's, I just, maybe it's just language that the word network is so linear. It is really hard to get out of the linearity of that in my mind. And I don't hear that in ecologies, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to bridge that. That's just.
So putting network and ecology. I mean, like looking at network and ecology together and questioning network. I mean, it's all a network. I mean,
Sort of.
parts connecting to make the whole.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, it could be just, language, just words.
Yeah, well,
Concepts.
that's a mental orientation of ours, or an egoic um I mean, how can you question network? How can you question web?
Yeah, I'm not questioning their
Right.
existence. I am uncomfortable. I'm feeling it's incomplete.
I'm
That's
sure.
yeah, that it doesn't really well enough express, in my view, the interconnected relationships that are really part of that. And maybe it's just my languaging. And one of the things that this other woman brought up, she said it's very male to say networks, and it's much more female to say web. And that was an interesting insight into that. And so that could be
Yeah.
part of my uncomfortableness with it. I don't know. Yeah, just ecologies express a richness I don't hear in networks. So that's my bother, such as it
Well,
is.
I'm interested in taking time to focus on and unpack web, network, ecology. It's worth our contemplation,
Yeah,
dialogue, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
I'm
is.
interested.
I mean, that when you talk about an ecology, immediately my nasal capacities come in. I'm smelling, dank, muck and, plant and effusion of things. You'd say network in my mind, and it kind of spins sometimes, but it doesn't, call forth this sensual
Yes.
information.
Yes.
And that's more important, I think, than we give it credit.
Yes.
You supposedly, I mean, I can't speak for an indigenous person because well, in one sense I am going way, 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 way back, but no, right now I'm a city person. But what I sense is that if you're living on the land, it's just it lends a whole different experience to the one listening to someone speak from that kind of connection.
Yeah.
That is my experience. That's what I've always found. And it's much more positive in the sense of a person can be absolutely certain that this is what I have experienced, is what he or she is saying. And as opposed to constantly being relegated to the idea of theory,
Mhm.
which gets tiring.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a rightness
Oh,
to
that
theory being.
that is such a good point, though, the enlivening that comes from that as opposed to the extraction.
Yeah.
That's excellent. God, that's excellent.
Say
Yeah.
it again. Clarify it to me, please.
Well, what I'm hearing Robert say and really point out is that his experience is enlivening. It fills him. There is an aliveness that comes from it. But when you get into the theory, it's draining.
The theory of what? Network,
Just theory.
ecology.
It's just those words that are theoretical, that
They
don't
are
with
draining.
the
Yes.
added bonus of an
Yes.
enlightening sensual perception.
Yes.
And it's very different. I mean, it's not just indigenous people. We tend to glorify that. An old farmer,
Yes.
I wouldn't touch Mr. Ox, Robert. He's liable to hurt you, and he don't mean to. This guy talking to me, this farmer. I mean, he knew his ox like a best friend. They spent a lot of time together, and just the way he put it, it's like makes me shiver rather than and here's the rule I'm laying down.
Yeah. 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 Yes. And even Fritjof's, I mean, his statement about AI, that it doesn't feed embodied knowledge.
There you
And
go.
that's today in a conversation about AI and parenting, which was really interesting by all these AI experts who have small children. The role of truth came up, and how do we determine truth? And truth, for me, has to be embodied. That's where we know what's true. The rest of it is all supposition and hopefulness. But we know truth when we experience it in our body.
Yeah.
and when it's connected to the earth. When it's not connected to the earth, we can rationalize up one side and down the other. We could create many universes that are integral within themselves, but don't connect to anything else. And that so distorts what's true.
Could you say truth is experienced metabolically?
Yeah.
I kind of think so.
Yeah, I like embodied better because it does talk about the body. Metabolic talks to me about what happens between the cells. And it does talk about between intelligences, the metabolism of information, if you will. Using Fritjof's four things, the biological, the cognitive, the social, and the ecological, is really interesting to think about what's metabolized in each of those. And if you add the spiritual, what is metabolized, and that what is digested, what is intaken and digested and excreted in each of those, what's the feeding piece of each of
So,
those. It's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Because in a lot of spiritual traditions, there is this idea of returning cycles, of life, of events that have been set in motion, basic karma. There are returning cycles continuously, which are like feeding,
Metabolic, yeah.
the way we, it's metabolic. It's feeding the way we think, act, and feel continuously. And to live in that flow is considered, the spiritual practice. I mean, I'm simplifying overly, sure, but that's why I think you need to include the spiritual, as you say, because it includes time.
Yes. Yeah, well, and so does the ecological, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the spiritual expands time. We got into this too at Fritjof's talk, which is kind of interesting because one of the women ask how what happens to people when they die, if there's, does our essence just disappear into everything, or how does that work from a systems point of view? So that was a perfect opening for me to step in and talk about the birds with a feather and the systems view that in my mind actually validates reincarnation, because nothing is separate from anything else. That's just true. There's nothing. So we cannot have a life that's separate from everything else. Makes no sense. Not possible. So what would another life be connected to? Another life, right? So that for me justified reincarnation. And yeah, it's
how,
just
how would you define reincarnation?
is living other lives, re-embodying through birth into another human form. And I would hypothesize they're not all that different, actually, because we get attached to what we look like.
I still don't understand what you're saying about reincarnation. You put it in terms of a new birth.
Well, a birth is how you embody. It's how the spirit embodies in a lifetime, is through birth. But our experiences are certainly not limited to this. I mean, we have experiences of people we have known before, or people that we just instantly love or instantly hate. We have experiences of people who've died and come back. So obviously there's some sense of self that exists without a body, or we wouldn't have those experiences with people. We wouldn't know they were there.
There would be
So
even have embodied purpose, we begin to develop over a lifetime, this is where I belong. This is what I need to be doing.
Yes.
And lo and behold, I mean, it projects into what we're good at. We seem to have
Yes.
else. Or at
Yes.
least the capability of developing certain skills over others. Like, don't ever ask me to remember the words of a song that I'm supposed to sing, because I will fail miserably, even though I can sing it well.
Or, I mean, they're finding with dementia that people remember the song even though they can't talk or remember their partner's name or their children's name. They can still remember the song and sing it. So there's more to us than our bodies, for sure. And what exactly that is, I think we still have lots of learning to do about that. But I mean, when you talk about cycles and karma and the feeling that we need, that we didn't get a lesson, we get it, we get it, and it's like, shucks, I thought I understood that. I thought I had it, and it didn't work. I didn't do it. I got to do it again. That's, for me, part of this continuum that we're engaged in. It's not just this existence. It's us learning, and we can't learn in one existence. There's so much. It's just not possible. So we got to come around again and again and again, and that's the game. That's what we're doing. It just makes perfect sense, and certainly systems reinforces all of that in my mind.
You know what? It sounds a little bit like instinct.
Like what?
Yeah, instinct.
Oh,
Yeah,
We-
it's sort of the memory of
we
all of that.
be able to incorporate this memory, in a cognitive way, whereas maybe my cat incorporates the memory, same type of memory, but it's in a more physical transaction. She does the same thing over and over. I mean, but how do I know? She may have cognitive results as well.
Well, some of the experiences that we've seen in evolution, just now, the evolution can happen in a matter of years in a species that's very short-lived. What's coming to mind is fireflies. And don't ask me where it was exactly. I'm not remembering the place. But they, in order to mate, have a chirping sound. And there was a predator that was able to tune into that chirping sound. And then they would infest the males, which do the chirping, and kill them. And so when that happened, there was a year of silence when everybody decided not to chirp. That's a problem, though, because it's hard to find mates when you're not doing something to attract them. But there was a year where there was no sound at all. And the next year, there was a purring. They had changed their tone as a species in a year. Documented.
Wow.
I mean, how does that happen?
and what does that mean? What principle are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking that they all communicated species-wide.
Right.
These critters that have no language, no mind,
Right.
did that and made decisions, changed their behavior and their biology, their bodies, so they could make different sounds intentfully.
So
It's
you're
huge.
you're saying that particular species consciously evolved.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You have to switch the meaning of the word consciously, but yeah.
Intentfully, they saw the danger, they shifted. That's very intentful. That certainly speaks to consciousness, and it certainly speaks to Fritjof's thing that all life is intelligent. The dragons of the Galapagos that are able to shrink their bodies, and this is like maybe over 4 or 5 years. They now, when it gets hot, actually change their body shape. Their bones actually change. So they're shrinking, they're smaller, they lose less heat. They've done that.
These are
These are all documented. These are all documented.
or is that the progression of birth and death?
I'm sorry.
Can an individual shrink its bones?
Yes, yes.
Or its next generation? Because that would be
The
fact that only the smaller ones survived.
no, they actually, yeah, everybody changes. Yes.
They're able to change themselves. Wow.
Yes. I mean, it's just amazing.
What comes to me in the midst of this is the fact that everything alive has cognition.
Yes.
Which is different than consciousness, I guess, because consciousness, I don't know, like is an evolutionary mark, but everything alive has cognition.
Well, what cognates?
What cognates? Life, all life has cognition. All species, everything autopoietic has cognition.
And can make choices based on what its experience is with the outer world.
Right. Cognition is a relationship with environment. I mean, it's environment, it's interacting. The environment and cognition interact.
Right. But what cognates is consciousness.
What cognates is consciousness. So you're saying a plant has consciousness?
Absolutely.
It's not just, it doesn't just have cognition in its interaction and relationship with its environment, but it has consciousness. And to me, consciousness and cognition are not exactly the same thing.
Well, cognition is the process of decision making. Consciousness is the ability to discern, I guess. I mean, that's, we're getting into what's life. How do we define what's alive? There's just, I can't separate them. And I can't separate consciousness and cognition from love either, because it is the love of life that is the force that drives it. The exuberance of life we talk about. I think it's like water and ice and steam look really different, but they're all the same thing. They're just a different manifestation of that. And I feel that way with consciousness, that cognition and love are just two manifestations of life, of consciousness. But it's the same thing.
The word love is hard. It's hard for me to include that word in this dialogue because it has, I mean, to unpack what's love, other terms would have to come in besides human-centric definition of an understanding of love.
Yeah, oh, I don't use it that way at all. I mean, that's why I said love of life, because and you're really right, because we don't have many words for love in English to start with. So we brush everything with the same color, and that's not true. And when we say that we love each other, we don't go, oh my God, you're so wonderful. That if we care for someone, that's an expression of love. If there is a reaching out to, an inclusion of, that's an expression of love. We don't have to be overwhelmed and, oh my God, starry-eyed about everything to be in love. You don't live in that state. When you live in love, you live in a caring, empathetic, sympathetic state.
Attentive. Very much attentive.
Attentive, yes. Yeah,
It's
yeah, and
reciprocity.
responsive.
It's reciprocity.
Yeah,
Life is reciprocal.
absolutely. Yeah.
It interacts with, there's
Yes.
constant interaction and reciprocity and exchange.
Yeah,
I'd rather use that word than love.
I think that is love, though.
That's so human centric.
It's not human centric.
Yeah,
It's life centric.
it is.
It's life.
But from our understanding.
No, it's because we don't have words for it.
Well,
I mean, agape.
reciprocity to love.
Yeah,
in
agape.
dialogue.
Yeah, I think agape is the only word I know, and that's not English.
Well, Greek has actually at least 3 words for love.
Yeah.
My grandfather used to drill us on this all the time. And sorry, I'm not coming up with the other 2, but eros, okay, is one, agape.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember too.
And there's another one.
Yeah.
So there are languages that have distinctions. But the thing that really gets, what drives me in this conversation is that whenever we use words, that's human centric.
Yeah.
I don't think any other creature does that. They may have some sense of symbols. Yes.
They do pictures, I think.
They probably do. Yeah, I'm reading a book on consciousness right now. And I mean, it's actually a study of the brain. And they're actually able to make prints by firing up an image center, and what's happening in that moment. They're showing, say, a monkey, a picture of something with electrodes in there. And they've done it with humans too, because it's not terribly invasive. They're just probes. They can actually print out a picture that's very close to what is being looked at.
Yes.
So in that sense, every living creature has, imagery, so symbols that they work with in their brain. But humans have put it into words, and language has, truly made all the difference. It's something that can easily be communicated, and plans and decisions can be made, and schemes, and all kinds of connivings.
And new worlds.
I like the framework and the word reciprocity because it speaks of the exchange.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yep. Yeah, in fact, I appreciate that because I had not really made that conscious connection. So, because reciprocity is a key piece of the resilient value set, and that would be where one of the places where love resides in that.
Reciprocity is central to life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the problem is there's a whole bunch of things that are central. Agency is central. Autopoiesis is central. We got a lot of centers.
And each of them is worthy of our focus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Dialogue.
Yeah. And meditation. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the word reciprocity because it makes me feel part of everything, because I know all the time I'm exchanging with everything.
Yeah. Yep.
And I like being part of it consciously.
Mm-hmm.
And honoring life and all of its processes and parts.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a story that's coming to mind that was told at the summit by one of the indigenous elders, and he was recounting when he was 12 years old, and he was living with his grandmother, and he said, "I don't want to be responsible anymore. It's too much. I can't be responsible for everything. And his grandmother says, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, you tell me that I'm responsible for the plants and the animals and the air and the ground. It's too much. I can't do it. And she said, well, you should be proud. And he said, what do you mean? And he says that the creator felt you had the capacity to do this and gave you that task. I mean, what a reframing, and he thought about it and went, okay, well, if he thinks I can.
I don't get it. I don't get what you're saying about human responsibility to what?
To everything. That's the indigenous way, is that we're part of everything. Therefore, we are responsible for life. We're responsible for the continuation of life, for
Okay,
keeping things going.
okay,
And he
Or
felt
if
at
we see
12,
something, to take care of it.
yes,
yeah,
yeah, not to let it go, not to slough it off, but to act.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're stewards of the earth.
Yeah,
Be a steward is a perfect way to
Yeah,
encapsulate the idea.
yeah.
yeah, and to be proud of that and to
Just,
treasure that.
just because we happen to come alive as, I don't know the rest of the sentence.
Well, I think in my view, Earth brings forth life that's needed to do something that is an intent from life's intent, and we are part of that. So there was an intent for us. So we're needed to do something specific that we as a species are uniquely designed to do. We've abdicated that for a long time. So now we're getting back into looking at what that might be. And we're on a discovery phase, I think.
Evolution is a symbiotic process, and we are a species that has capacity to do stuff with that, to steward, to steward the earth with our big brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, to really help life take its next step. But it's all about life, which is part of my frustration with the technology fetish we've gotten in ourselves into. I think it's a detour and a short, an undermining of that.
We're
Well,
we're we're a midwifing species
Mhm.
on Earth of life on Earth.
but think of what's doing the midwifing. I mean, our conversation right now is so germane to a question that I've had for years, is why is there so much difference between various, types of schooling? The type that seems to be gaining, the highest credence in public sense is just regurgitation of facts that are stuffed into your head. That's essentially how we create algorithms for AI. And then you get other systems like,
Montessori or Waldorf?
Montessori, and the German
Waldorf.
Waldorf, which is totally different. It's based on experience. It's based on embodied knowledge. They have your whole body learn, as opposed to simply, finding some brain cells that we, can hold a certain types of bits of information.
Yeah.
It's a very different concept, a trail toward knowledge, totally different. And it's just hitting me right now as we're talking about this. So, unpacking this whole subject, that these types of schools couldn't be more different. And of course, there is one that's the basis of all of our primary to higher education. And then the other is really on the outskirts. And parents are abdicating more and more especially if they're urban dwellers, because the kids are allowed to watch TV or their phones all the time. You don't have kids playing outside very much. Local neighbors, they're being referred to as free range parents because the kids are free range kids. What's the difference? They're out there getting dirty and yelling and screaming. And guess whose house is the most popular for other kids to come visit? Their house. This is embedded in our entire culture, at the very least, maybe civilization right now. So I'm not surprised at the fascination with technology. It doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere when you look at the results.
Right.
Yeah, what that was part of the discussion this morning actually is the one of the futures of AI that they're looking at is the possibility that every kid could have its own, his or her own tutor that would relate to their particular neurodiversity and their particular range of interests and teach, coach them in those ways so that we could have a more flexible and diverse educational system. Because right now everybody's sort of taught the same way. You get it or you don't. If you don't, you get poor grades, and people just go, oh my, they're dumb or stupid. They don't really learn, instead of stepping in to say, what can we do to help you learn? Because this isn't working for you. But AI would allow us to do that, to step in and say, well, this isn't working. So, using Gardner's 7 different kinds of intelligences, maybe music is your path, or maybe this is your path, and give everybody, every individual student, the chance to discover that. Give us the resources to make that happen, which right now we don't have because we don't have people who are that divergent.
Yeah, there's more and more evidence to say that music is a pathway into a greater understanding of mathematics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very much
It's
tied
not
together.
by chance that many of the great mathematicians play an instrument, are musicians in one way or another, or the physicists. And I'm sure there are many other connectors like that. Well, for me, I think physically, and I had to start building.
Yes.
I was, 5 years old. I was climbing trees and taking, crates and cardboard boxes up to the lowest branches where I could get in building stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was also gave me a fairly good living throughout my life. How about that?
Yeah. And this is one group that everybody knows has been missed, is those people who are kinesthetic, who need to engage with something with their bodies in order to actually get it. And they're usually shunted off to woodworking class or auto mechanics or something like that, instead of really seeing it as a way to get other kinds of concepts in. Some of the project learning, I think, integrates that. So you can go build a boat, for instance, and you get all sorts of other kinds of learning in that process, because you have to figure out different things, and take different measures, and understand wind and water and all that kind of stuff comes in to building a boat. So it's a way of opening those channels.
I mean, the worst thing that possibly could have happened to our children is to have these, to teach to the test.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's nationwide, but I hear about it
Yep.
here in Georgia because, there's quite actually, there's not as much of a controversy as I would have thought, or maybe that's just the way the news media is, covering it. But to me, that would be shocking if I had a child at this.
If what's emerging in me as I'm hearing you both is an advanced art of teaching of learning would be creating conditions for the children to learn by doing and being, not just intelligencing the brain. I mean,
Right.
teaching the brain,
Right.
but actually learning as an interactive being, a cognitive being with its environment.
Yeah. So when I was teaching high school, I taught kids how to go into business for themselves.
How to what?
Go into business for themselves. So they got to think about what they do. They got to figure out how to do it. All of that kind of stuff. And I didn't teach English, so I couldn't help them write contracts. I didn't teach algebra, so I couldn't help them figure out their products and do that kind of analytical stuff. They had to go to other places in the school to get that information, but now they knew how to apply it. And they knew they wanted it, which was more important, actually. Now they needed to know how to do this and where do I go to get that. Now I want to know. It's not just busy work. It's something that I need to do to get what I want to have happen. Yeah. And it was controversial at the time, and it was actually undermined by the school administration. But other than that, we had success for a couple of years. Great stories.
Well, you teach to the test, and not much else can get through.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's no relevance.
I mean, it would be terribly dispiriting. I mean, I read that it is to teachers, to youngsters who come in, full of brimming with pride and enthusiasm for their future, lovingly, giving of themselves to their, and then they are caught up in this mechanism.
Yep. And they don't pass and they aren't good at it. And yeah.
Well, the students, but I'm talking about the teachers as well.
That's right.
They get poor results because Johnny, didn't have any breakfast and usually
Right.
doesn't, and so forth and so on.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I did substitute teaching for a
just
while.
so silly.
And the teachers get books that say, today, what you're teaching is this. The resources are in the back of the book. And every day you do that. Well, if the kids don't get it, too bad. We did that a week ago. Sorry. There's no way to bring kids back to circle through again, to do all those kinds of creative things you need to do to get kids. It's just this repetition. So if you have a teacher that is willing to do that, then they're not interacting with the kids at all. They're interacting with their book and what they're being told to do. That's what they're interacting with. And they're foisting that on the kids who get it or don't get it. And then just get to go.
And that's not learning. That's programming.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's not exciting. Yeah.
And that's a world in which AI makes total sense. Now, I'm not disputing you a little while ago, you did mention, that AI could be used to individualize approaches to education. But I'm assuming that if that were done, that the AI is linked in with some adults in the room, who are actually watching the child, and the AI is just supplemental. It does not take over at all. I mean,
sure.
In other words, there's nothing wrong with using tools. I mean, I have to use them in woodworking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the strength anymore to saw, a lot with a handsaw. But the AI is a tool, and if it's used for devious reasons, which is what everyone's scared of, but even if it's just being used for lazy purposes, it's just going to be devastating.
It's going to be dampening, not accelerating. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, creative people are disruptive people.
Yay.
Yeah. But that's what, that's not how our society is designed. We're designed for repetition and comfort and no surprises, having the same expectations, all that kind of stuff. And that's not creative.
And,
So,
and you can't learn anything like that.
yeah, well, we don't, do we? Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, to
And
get back on the, the antecedents to learning, specific skills in life. I mean, you can go to each one of the arts. Dance is
yes,
a lot to do with systems,
yeah,
systems thinking.
yeah,
Art has so much to do with seeing negative spaces, with seeing relationships. Music, has to do with the well, what would I
it's
say?
the same thing. The pauses and phrases between notes is negative space.
So it's all of them. I mean, and when there's a certain predisposition, in other words, interest in the student, they will absolutely go through that, rip through it, and then start looking for what else. I mean, they're like little vacuum cleaners. What else works like this? No, I met several times. I was a guest critic at the Georgia Tech architecture school, and there, the students, some of them were more interesting than others, some of them quite boring in terms of their ability to think outside the box or think in any way. There was this one kid who was just absolutely astonishing, and he'd been homeschooled. And I did talk to him for a little bit about what his parents had him doing. And it was absolutely stunning how they had figured out, grokked is the old term that people use, grokked what his driving, pattern was, what would work for him. And they just fed that. And then he got turned loose. And he was just alive and just full of, different thoughts, connections, relationships, systems. I mean, it was just all going on all the time. So it's an example that just stays with me. That can be taught. He was taught. He wasn't any smarter, inherently
Well,
the other kid.
rather than the word taught, it seems like they created the conditions conducive to his learning.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
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 Because being taught is actually makes me want to throw up.
But how hard that is on adults, you see, who have not had that experience and yet are supposed to engender it. They don't want to do that. It's very, very confronting. It makes teachers just crazy because they don't know answers. Their own interests were squelched, so it's really hard for them to be excited about other people's interests not being squelched. Who are they and why should you have it, and all that kind of stuff gets in there. It's really hard for adults to let kids be who they are if they haven't had that experience themselves.
And it's a bother.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
What'd you
It's
say?
a bother. It gets in the way of your own me time.
And agendas and all that. Yeah. You can't be lazy in that. You've got to step up into that. And it takes effort, it's energy, it's work, it's new stuff you have to learn and be involved in.
It's one of the primaries of life is to pay attention. That life is happening at the speed of life. And so
Yes.
you simply have to be there.
Yes.
I've got this little card that I wrote on the back of when I was spending a lot of time with Andreas Weber's writing and that school of thought. And it says, life needs to be able to fail in order to prevail.
There's another one.
Yes.
I like that.
And these aren't just slogans. I mean,
They have to have challenge.
there's a reality behind these things that's very, very important. I mean, if that indigenous youngster's grandma hadn't been there in that moment to just capture the moment with her realization of what needed to be said and then saying it, it's changed his life.
Yeah, he was too sick to go to school. That's why he was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the spirit works in interesting ways, which is one of his kind of points, that if he hadn't been blessed with illness, he would not have had the education he had with his grandparents, because he had to stay home and listen to their stories. So he got the history of his people because he couldn't go to school, because he was too sick to go to school. So it gave him the ability to carry forward what they knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gave him the opportunity
Yeah.
to carry forward all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. You just never know. You just never know.
Opportunity is a really potent word in the scheme of learning and growing. I mean, what better, what more loving can be provided than opportunities to grow,
Yeah.
which involves challenge
And
Yeah.
failure.
I have a feeling that, there's so much bemoaning of, high school has become just this cauldron of emotions and social interaction disasters and so forth. And that could well be because the whole rest of the system is just boring as hell.
Well, and so was high school.
Or around, that's what I mean, the whole the high school setup. And I mean, that's another reason why football's so popular. I mean, at least you're really learning to strive for something, to become good at it, to, receive the adoration of the whole school. I mean, it's
and testing your skills and gaining skills, and
it's motivation. And where, now I'm interviewing a bunch of kids for the college, and it's just very interesting to see what they're willing to talk about with me. I'm quite a bit older, but actually, once I do start honing in, it, little by little, because they're nervous, well, I mean, it is an official interview. I mean, they've been asked to the college admissions to give it. Once I can get through that nervousness and have poked, whether it's music or some thought, some book they read, or some dream of theirs, because they will ultimately tell me, because I know how to look for it. They just open up. We have these great conversations.
Right.
How often does that happen? I wonder,
Yeah.
I wish I had interaction with young people.
One of the few I have with that age group.
Yeah, I don't either.
And I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit disappointing to me that I know that most of them aren't going to get in.
That what? That what?
Most of them aren't going to be admitted to the college, because I went to Yale and 10,000 applicants for 1,000, or more than that, 15, 20,000 applicants for 1,000 places. But I am at least getting kids that at least they're, by and large, they've had the chance to do some real thinking. they have the encouragement in one way or another.
Can you coach them to alternatives if they don't get in? That would be my strategy, is to say, well, there's this school, but there's also these other things. Just
Very
put your-
often I go into that, what other schools have you applied to?
yeah. Or what else could you do that would further this, even if it's not school? Yeah.
Or, I'm surprised you chose Yale. They don't have a particular, specialty in this. How about Georgia Tech?
Yeah.
Georgia Tech's quite a school. I mean, it's like, it has been like number 5 in the country for a technical college. It's just right here in downtown Atlanta. And so I can actually point to a very good school. Or if you're totally into partying, then you should go to the University of Georgia. It's evidently just as highly placed as a party school. Nationwide.
To go back to life needs to be able to fail in order to prevail. It seems that rather than teach a child something, you create the conditions conducive to their learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's far more valuable than whatever you would teach their brain, whatever crease you'd make in their brain.
Yeah. Well, it teaches them more about themselves too, what they like and what they're comfortable with and all that kind of stuff.
And who they are as a human species.
Yeah.
What's their relationship with everything else? What's evolution? Because evolution is nature evolves. We're nature. And so to bring in that framework.
Well, one of the best things, or one of the most effective ways to help a youngster through making mistakes, making failures, is to immediately point out what options they have, as you say, Kathryn, because one of the worst aspects of the treadmill for getting into an Ivy League school, or the highest, the most difficult schools to get into, is you cannot fail. That's the impression the kids get. You cannot fail. If you fail ever, you're not going to get in.
Yeah. You're done.
You're
There's
done.
nothing else. Yeah.
After school, if you don't get an internship at some big financial institution or a top lawyer, or you're never going to make it.
Yeah.
Or an internship with a politician. I mean, there are high routes to success, and everybody's got their eyes fixed on it.
Yep.
Whereas for success in life, it's more like this homeschooled kid where his parents just kept saying, and what about, have you tried this?
Yeah, the whole difference between teaching or creating conditions conducive to how to think more than what to think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And what to pay attention to.
Yeah, because
And what to pay attention to, and how to research, how to find out stuff if you
exactly,
don't know.
exactly,
Yeah.
because that's education, valuable education.
Yep.
I mean, I became aware of that quite some time back. That my education was about how to think. That I was educated to think things through, to see things in perspective. That's it. Not
Yeah.
what to think.
Yeah. Or memorizing stuff. You can always find out facts.
Right. And it's an experience of overcoming. It's an experience of being challenged to think through, to see, to have, well, you know.
Well, and I'm also thinking about memory stuff. One of the things that I wish we did now, which we used to do, is kids would memorize poems.
Yeah.
That used to be a big part of education. And I think that is so useful because there's so much in a poem. And when when you have it in your head, you can start making connections to your life. You pull that poem out as, oh, this is a reflection. And that there's a wisdom making that comes from that you don't get in any other way. And it really is a way to bring forth the wisdom of the past in a very rich and lively way. It's just really fun for me when people can quote, a phrase or a poem, part of a poem or something like that to apply to some situation. It's just very neat that can happen, and we don't use that kind of memory anymore.
And prior to the printing press,
Right.
1400 and something, everything was passed down, but
Yes.
verbally, every
Yeah.
story, every bit of knowledge.
Yep.
And so that is absolutely built into our genetic,
Mhm.
embodied genetic knowledge.
Yeah.
There's no question that we're turning our backs on this sort of thing
Yeah.
as a society.
I've always had, well, the past few decades, a an an interest in words, in numerology, and by that I mean I often break down words to their number. I mean, what am I trying to say? I probably have something on my desk that I could show you that I do, but it's like A is 1, B is 2.
Yeah.
So this word, and there's something in it that is pithy enough to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's under the category of numerology, but
Well, that is a use of numerology. I use it a lot for addresses, actually, to what is the vibration of a place.
okay, say more. What do you mean?
Well,
How do you use it?
well, you can take the number of the house, and you can add, if you wish, the numbers from the street name and that kind of stuff to give you a sense of what the energy is on a house. So, I live in a one house, which is a start of things, which is certainly what this experience in this city has been for me. Um, so it's just, again, it's kind of a useful understanding of the resonance that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like an indicator. It doesn't tell your fortune or any of those kinds of things, but it it has an influence,
Because letters have vibration. I mean, numbers
Yeah.
have vibration, letters have vibration. I mean, when you spell out a word and assign numbers, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say, but I think you already know what I mean.
Well, and that's our names, they do the same thing with our names and our birth date and all of that to give you a sense of what direction you're headed and what things are programmed for you to resonate with, whether you do or not. You still have that choice. But it sometimes can clarify stuff and give you insights that you might not have had before, and directions that maybe were too tenuous to really connect with. So yeah.
I remember, I don't even know if I can express this, but when you assign numbers, when you spell out a word and you give each letter its number, and then find words that are resonant with that vibrationally.
Mm,
I do that sometimes to bring more energy into something I'm trying to empower.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
It is it's an interesting experience.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
But I need to get going.
It's time to go. Yes.
Oh, it is. Thanks
This
for
was
playing,
marvelous.
buddy.
Oh, it's good to have you both here. Yeah.
So what you put in the chat here, say again what this is.
That's from Fritjof's class.
Right.
So that's his new way of thinking about his work, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bless you both. See you soon.
See you in
See
a
you
week.
next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.